Are you fed up with all the headlines about sports' relationship with gambling? What can the industry do to protect itself against the public backlash sports sponsorship has caused? Are the operators putting enough thinking into specific deals? All this and more on the GI Huddle. Hello there folks, and welcome to the third instalment of the GI Huddle with myself, David Cook, and the rest of the Gambling Insider editorial team. First, a man who would love nothing more than to wear a Gambling Insider logo emblazoned on his sleeve, it's Tim Poole.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Second, a man who sleeps in Gambling Insider merchandise pyjamas, it's Matthew Enderby.
Good PJs are hard to come by. Hello.
And third, a man with the perfect face for any advertising campaign, it's Nathan Joyce.
Oh, very nice of you.
My pleasure. So sponsorship, of course, is something that gets talked about a hell of a lot in the gambling industry, especially in the UK at the moment. And there's that headline figure that gets put on all, particularly all the football sponsorships. Last season it was 9 Premier League shirt sponsors. From gambling companies, 17 of the 24 championship clubs being sponsored by gambling companies. But we see it across, all the mainstream sports really, particularly in the UK. So a question for the floor to start off with should be, should the industry be concerned about how it reacts to the press attention that all the sponsorships have caused?
No, surely the industry knew it was going to expect this backlash. You only have to look at tobacco and alcohol over the years and that advertisement to realise that. So they knew that this would come, but it clearly hasn't stopped them, and the amount of money in it, it won't continue to stop them in the future.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think 100% the industry, and any industry for that matter, has to be concerned about whatever kind of press attention that it is generating from itself. In the day and age of clickbait news and everything like that, websites know what's going to generate a lot of attention quickly, and they have that data very fast. So the industry has to be aware that if you put out if something controversial happens, people are going to want to read about it and going to want to know more about it, and so they have to be aware of the attention it's going to generate.
Yeah, I agree that it shouldn't be a surprise, but I wouldn't be concerned personally, because gambling is a product that's intrinsically linked to sport. You can bet on sports, so I see there's no issue in terms of sports betting companies sponsoring football teams or sporting tournaments. So yeah, I wouldn't be, like I said, it's expected, but I wouldn't be concerned because I think gambling companies are doing nothing wrong.
An example of what we're seeing this week, just in the last 2 days, I think we've seen 3 Premier League teams confirm gambling shirt sponsors for next season. We've got Wolves with ManBetX, we've got Burnley with LoveBet, and today we've got Aston Villa with WATA, who consequently sponsored Wolves last season. But what we would probably expect to see is just the announcement, the logo on the shirt. We'll see it every Premier League game, and chances are that will be that in terms of what we, the mainstream, see about it. So why are we not then seeing the operators use the sponsorships for good causes? Or have we seen any clear efforts from operators to use these sponsorships for good causes and to create a more positive image about the industry?
Yeah, I think it's a valid point, and those are great names, by the way. Those are LoveBet and ManBetX. It's a valid point, because I think there are examples of some real good being done. So we had 32 Red. They're doing something with mental health with their sponsorship of Derby, and Le2 previously, when they sponsored Swansea, they donated season tickets to people from a homeless shelter, something along those lines. Forgive me if it's not exactly that, but it was definitely in that ballpark. But they should be promoting this more. I really don't see why operators don't just put, like, their brand is all over a kit. So yeah, they should be shouting about these achievements. And if the Guardian or the Daily Mail said, "Oh, evil gambling company donates to good cause," it's not going to have the same ring to it, is it? Because there's no way of misreporting that story.
There's definitely an issue there of sort of shouting about your own good deeds, right? If you do something positive, yeah, that's good. But if you're the one to really circulate it around the world, then it's like, okay, what they're really doing here is just trying to get some attention.
Yeah, if they're donating 2 season tickets, that might be all well and good, £400-500 max. But if you did an article on that, no doubt the comment would be, yeah, but you're getting millions and millions of pounds of revenue from exploiting people a year. So 2 season tickets, inviting you to the game where you're going to see a betting advertisement, that's not going to really do too much good, is it? I think the media will always put a negative spin on it. So if you hear about it, great. But if you, like Matt said, if you go, oh, here, we're doing this is great, it's always going to have a bad backlash to it.
Something that I'd really like to know, actually, from just from my perspective, and see about the natural effect it can have on consumers. And we're only 4 people in this room, so we don't obviously represent the entire cohort of people who'll be watching Premier League football next season, for example. But does seeing a brand name on a shirt have any effect on yourself in terms of wanting to bet with that particular operator? Does it make you want to switch from any account that you currently use on any gambling site to go and use those operators in particular? Because I'm just thinking of times when I might watch Formula One as a kid and see Marlboro advertised on the back of Ferraris, thinking about how it didn't make me want to smoke cigarettes. But I don't know if there's any kind of psychological effect in seeing so many. I don't know.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it makes me want to switch or do anything sort of active because of this information, but it does. You're just made aware of it, right? You're like, oh, this is maybe a brand I didn't know about, or this is a new company that's trying to make a name for itself. It just generates that kind of attention.
Yeah, a lot of the sponsors which we're seeing in the Premier League are like aimed at the Far East and that sort of population. And
that market.
Yeah, that's it. The market in the Far East, to not only look at the Big Six and expand into other teams as well, and they can exploit that. So Bournemouth can only reach so many people, for example, within the UK, but with the Premier League getting bigger and bigger in Asia, people might want to then maybe switch teams or support other sides, and I think someone like Leicester City has brought that out with them winning the Premier League. So I think that's what it's more appealed at. I don't look at W88 and think, oh, I wonder if I can get better odds there than on William Hill or Bet365. You're going to go with reliable operators, especially within the UK. It's another UK operator, probably a bad example now, but on reflection, BetBright, which came in, you might have a little look at them because you might see something different or some more offers, but if they're not based within the UK, I don't think I'd want to switch.
Yeah, I might be unique in this. I certainly wouldn't switch based on a sponsorship, but when I was looking to create a new account this season, I looked at BetVictor and I support Liverpool and their partnership, so it did kind of sway me. Like I said, I'm not sure if I'm alone in that, but there is an example of it worked at least a little bit.
So yeah, because it was your club, you just
yeah, exactly.
felt that affinity a little bit more.
Exactly, yeah. But as Nathan says, mainly a lot of this brand awareness is aimed at the Asian market and things like that.
I would agree that with UK operators, like I bought BetBright, being a Forest fan, I would never have backed anything with them before, being a small operator. I'd normally prefer to go to a big one. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense just to at least check them out if they're UK based.
But see where the industry has got an issue see where operators have an issue is when PR departments sit down and marketing departments sit down and they talk about how they're going to publicise a sponsorship of a football team or any sporting event for that matter. You can try and engage the players by offering things like free bets or special offers, for example, but then there's always going to be a negative reaction to that at the same time, isn't there, in terms of people saying, oh, you're just using this as a chance to entice more people to gamble. So it kind of makes you think, what can you actually do that helps the consumer or does something for the consumer that they'll enjoy or be entertained by, but also not at the same time create more of a backlash in the media?
I think the best example I've seen is like free coach travel and that to long games and stuff, because that benefits everybody. If someone turns around and says, right, we're paying for your coach travel, which is going to be £30, and you're going with 3 or 4 people, I think that's one of the only positive things, is actually getting the people to the games, and then like the match day experiences. You're not there thinking, oh, this is going to set me back a little bit, or this is all here because of gambling. You're there in a box, or you've got like season tickets, as Tim touched upon earlier. You're just there to appreciate the game because you're applying for that competition, or you're going to the game with free travel because you want to go and watch the football game. You're not looking at it from a betting angle or trying to think that you're being lured into something to do with having a bet.
Yeah, so they facilitate the sport, the game, that enjoyment rather than better odds or a bonus sign up or something like that.
Yeah, so I looked today and Football Index has, I'm going to keep going back to Forest while it's fresh in my mind.
Got to be done.
Nottingham Forest fan on this podcast, listeners.
There are other teams available.
They're not. Football Index sponsored Forest today, and Nottingham Forest did like a post on social media, but then the first link to it from Football Index was, oh, Forest fans, put this code in and then you'll get a £10 free bet. And I just think that's the wrong way to go about it. I think you need to approach it from a personal point of view, as in the free coach travel or tickets or something like that.
Yeah, because on top of everything else, it might just be a bit generic.
Yeah.
Like to do something.
Yeah, that's it. And a lot of fans aren't particularly happy with betting operators. There's been a few stories, as we mentioned, over the last couple of days. You click on all of them, and it's just negative feedback. So the last thing you want to do is draw into, oh, let's have a free bet on us because you're a Forest fan or you're a Villa fan with us. So, yeah, I think you just need to approach it from a completely different angle and just strip that back completely.
And one of the big stories regarding shirt sponsorship which got national attention recently was regarding GVC. I don't know if part of this is because there seems to be a bit of an obsession with GVC's CEO at the moment, Kenny Alexander. A lot of people wanted to talk about his salary in particular. But with them saying that they're talking about ending shirt sponsorship completely, and they've done plenty, through BetDAC in particular, not so much with Ladbrokes or with Coral, certainly not in football. But what will this plan, what effects, will this plan have on the market and the perception of the market?
So I think GVC are in a pretty unique position in that it's a major player and it's a giant, and if they stopped all football sponsorship with their brands, arguably it wouldn't lose them any revenue because everyone knows these brands anyway, and it would probably just save them some sponsorship costs. I think they're perfectly entitled to go down this route, and as you say, it's because there's a lot of attention on Kenny Alexander, and I can certainly understand his point of view, his not so much agenda, but they want to reduce the pressure on themselves in this sort of in the public eye. But for me, when there was the voluntary advertising whistle-to-whistle ban, I think that was a good sign for the industry. But I think now trying to stop all sponsorship is a step too far for me. And I have written about this previously. If you don't mind me shamelessly plugging my article on the matter, if you want to hear more.
Not at all.
But yeah, I think it doesn't really affect GVC. So for example, a smaller operator, so BetBright is a perfect example. Okay, they didn't do too well in the end, but when they signed with Nottingham Forest, people would get that exposure, whereas Ladbrokes, Coral, Bwin, all these brands, they don't really need that exposure because they're already very well-known brands.
Yeah, they are very well known, and I think sort of in the immediate future, you'll definitely, it wouldn't sort of affect them too much, but it will be interesting further down the line to see if there has a knock-on sort of effect, because, I mean, if they're not getting their name out there as much as they were before, will that eventually catch up with them?
Yeah, is it easier for Ladbrokes to say, because Ladbrokes obviously don't, do they even sponsor any football teams? Big football teams?
Just the
SPFL,
SPFL.
is the main
Yeah,
thing.
so you look into the Premier League, it's easier for them to turn around and go, right, I don't think there should be shirt sponsorships deals anymore.
Exactly.
Because that's not going to affect Ladbrokes at all. So if they can wipe out competition completely, especially from the Premier League and the Championship, which is so heavily viewed, surely that's just a plus for Ladbrokes, and they look like the good moral people out of it anyway.
Yeah, exactly. It's hard to disagree with that, and I think that's something we've got to be wary of, because, like Matt said earlier, if people aren't going to take press releases seriously, if you're promoting your own good deeds, this kind of thing, some people will be able to see, well, actually, you're going to benefit from this, so does it mean as much?
The next interesting point is about how the gambling sponsors in football have created so much attention, but not for doing it with the top clubs. Even though the top clubs all have official betting partners, we've not seen them on the shirts. And just ran some of the numbers the other day and saw that the average Big Six front of shirt sponsorship last season, I guess for any listeners who aren't aware, I'll just run through who those Big Six are now: Manchester United, Manchester City, Arsenal, Liverpool, Chelsea, Tottenham Hotspur. The average shirt sponsorship for them was worth about £38 million per year if you're looking at last season's deals, whereas the other 14 teams, the average is £5.3 million per year. So we're looking at a difference of about £30 million in a year, but which, to a tier one operator, you wouldn't, regard that as a huge amount of money.
Yeah, it's not out of reach.
Something to do with marketing, certainly when we see about the amount the industry spends on marketing. So why do we think the gambling operators are not paying the rate that you need for a top club, like what we saw when Bwin was sponsoring the likes of Real Madrid and AC Milan about 10 years ago?
I think it might be due to the bad publicity. If they're going to be paying excess of however much you stated there, how much was the difference? 30 million?
About 30 million.
If they're going to be paying 30 million but just receive negative feedback, is it worth it for them? Probably not.
Yeah, I think that's a big issue, and also it's just attainability really, because look at Liverpool Standard Chartered. That's was that an investment bank? Is it? I'm not quite sure. It's bank, financial kind of company.
Yeah.
What's Man United? Is it
Chevrolet.
Chevrolet. Yeah, I mean these are massive companies, so it would be tricky to compete with them. And I've spoken to Latou's CEO Paul Fox, who said that as a gambling company you just won't get the top six shirt. So I think for the reason that there's a lot of competition, because we have to understand gambling is a massive industry, but there are bigger industries out there. And as Nathan says, I think the exposure then. But what would be interesting, I'm going to throw it out there, if let's say Liverpool was sponsored by a major gambling operator, with the funds and marketing availability for Liverpool, a club like that, really good at marketing. Imagine them being sponsored by a massive gambling company, but being able to promote it in the right ways, having better PR, having a more creative approach. Could that actually sway public opinion a little bit towards it? Probably not, but it's an interesting scenario, I think.
Yeah,
That's
definitely interesting.
If you, like we previously spoke about with Paddy Power, when they put a bit of effort and a bit of thought into it and didn't make it particularly gambling related, we all really enjoyed it and that worked. And then we've completely slated the ones where it looks like someone's gone, right, we've got 10 minutes before we've got to be in this meeting room and get it done. Let's just write this down and see what happens. So yeah, I completely agree with that.
Yeah, it would be very interesting to see how that goes. I think I agree with both of your points, and I think it sort of makes sense in a way that operators don't necessarily want to push for the higher bracket of Premier League teams and stuff, because I mean when you don't have to pay 38 million, when you can just pay 5.3 and still have your name on a shirt of it, like it's going to play Liverpool one week, and
Exactly,
all the
yeah.
Liverpool fans will see that shirt and see that sponsor, and then Man United a few weeks later, and you're going to be playing these top 6 teams twice a year, so maybe they kind of weigh the difference there and say, oh, we don't really need to pay 38 million, we can just get away with 5 here and still get similar levels of publicity.
Yeah, exactly. And the fact that the backlash which gambling companies get is saying that they're always trying to be in your face, but the fact that they're not sponsoring any teams particularly really in the Premier League suggests otherwise to me.
And just to go back to another shameless plug from yourself, Tim, when talking about about when you spoke to Le2 CEO Paul Fox, because Le2 used to sponsor Swansea City in the Premier League. And it's interesting, we see this week W88, who used to sponsor Wolves, now sponsoring Aston Villa, hopping from one Premier League club to another. And it just makes me think, and this is something that I'm sure you would have discussed with him as well, how much due diligence goes into which particular club or which particular partner an operator wants in the Premier League? Do they think about this much at all? Or is it purely a case of, we know the number of eyeballs on this league, the actual team we go with doesn't matter?
Yeah, I think it's, and not to disrespect operators in any way, I think it is the latter. And not, as I say, not because of a lazy approach, but just because the solution is that simple. Yeah. And like Matt said, Le2 gave a specific example of Swansea played Man United a lunchtime kickoff once, so it was the only game the whole world was watching. And so basically, yeah, all the eyeballs are on there, and it's it's like shortcut does sound disrespectful, but it's there. Rather than sponsoring a top 6 company, you can pay less and still get massive exposure.
Yeah, I don't think the football teams really care what the sponsor looks like either. At the end of the day, there's so much pressure to reach the Premier League or to reach the Championship. If one betting operator is offering 5-6 million and another one's offering 8 million, I mean, it doesn't really matter to them. They're getting an extra 2 million, and that can go towards potentially signing a player which will get them to the Premier League, and then hopefully it snowballs from there. I mean, you only have to look at Norwich City, which had like Leo Vegas. I mean, I don't think they really wanted like Paw Prints all over their home kit, but if they're getting extra money out of it, which has obviously helped them out over the years, and now they're back in the Premier League, I mean, it shows that money talks.
And then when it comes to what the big UK names do, it's just quite interesting that the Ladbrokes, the Corals, the William Hills, the Paddy Powers, the Betfairs, we're not seeing them go down this same route as many Asia-facing operators are doing. Maybe these smaller to mid-tier operators are doing. But where we often do see the likes of the big UK names in sport are in sports like darts, like snooker, like boxing. They're not necessarily going for the biggest point football, but going for maybe a more traditional gambling audience in that sense with those other sports. The slight anomaly is Bet365 with Stoke City, but we know that's a slightly one-off case because of who owns Stoke City.
Yep.
But why do we think that the big traditional UK names are going about it this way?
I really don't know.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to see, especially with darts. I mean, Ali Pally, the William Hill darts, and in December is massive, but no one's ever called it out and gone, hang on a minute, why is this all about William Hill? And it's the same with snooker, with Betfred and that. So I honestly don't know. I think maybe football's under the microscope too much, that people and the money which like darts and snooker and that is bringing in is like minute compared to football. So maybe they don't see an actual issue or an actual problem there.
Yeah, because it's interesting actually, because it makes me think, when was the last time you read an article saying something along the lines of snooker's dangerous relationship with gambling, or boxing's dangerous relationship with gambling, or darts dangerous relationship
Yeah.
with gambling.
Yeah, exactly.
But we
Can't.
constantly see football's dangerous relationship with gambling.
Yeah.
And how many people were watching the Joshua fight last weekend?
Yeah.
I mean, and the ring's just like covered in William Hill. But
Yeah.
that's never ever brought to our attention.
Yeah.
I do think Premier League clubs are very eager to push like the family factor
Yes.
for their kind of where their entertainment, essentially what they provide. You know, if you see I'm sure like on tickets, just on pictures of things, it's like a dad bringing his son down to the grounds for a game, or something about that, where they're really, it's almost like part of the business model to say like, get your kids involved, bring them on down this Saturday and watch your favorite team play football. So I think that they sort of feel that there might be a bit more like they have to take the responsibility there, don't they? And they can't sort of just ram it down people's throats as much as maybe the more gambling aware audience would in snooker or pool or any of these other sports we've mentioned.
Yeah, I think it links back also to the same issue of the Premier League sponsors attracting sort of that Asian market and Asian fans. The likelihood is, now obviously there's going to be new customers every time, every year, and especially new customers who just turn 18, so technically there's a new market right there. But generally speaking, football fans will know the big UK brands. But maybe there's sort of potential for new players in these sort of smaller, more niche sports that might not be as accustomed to betting because they don't have it on every team's kit or every player's kit in that sport, if that makes sense. So the UK market there might be a little bit more potential for growth in a darts or a snooker rather than football, where everyone who bets on football, the likelihood is they know Bet365, William Hill, and people like that.
The thing is, when you go to the football, whether it be your friends or whoever, you're normally thinking about who's going to win today, and you're talking about it. You are naturally talking about the game in a betting angle, whether you're going to have a punt on it or not. But when you go to the darts, a lot of the time it's fancy dress with your mates, and it's like 5 or 6 players, and a lot of people just want to go for the atmosphere, and they don't actually even know who's playing. And a lot of the time people aren't even watching the darts, they're just there to pretty much get drunk and have a good time with your mates. So you're approaching it completely different, so you're not in the mindset of, well, what bet am I going to have here, especially in like the preliminary rounds of like the darts in December.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's only not quite got that same traditional kind of father-son feeling as I guess in boxing darts. And people remembering that first darts match they went to with their dad is not the same as going to the first football match.
Yeah, absolutely.
And potentially it's a good revenue maker for an operator, because if you don't even know who's playing, but you're there and you had a couple of pints and maybe not in the most responsible fashion, thought I'll have a punt. Could be a revenue there for operators.
But should actually just go back to Matt's point about the family feel, because I know that you mentioned it in an article recently about a Huddersfield fan who said about even when they don't put the sponsor on the children's shirts, the children's sized shirts, it might be kind of pointless if they keep seeing the logos and everything else around the ground. So
so that in that article, what I wrote about was this guy went to the game with his son, and he got the Huddersfield Town kit for his kid, and when they got into the stadium, he was just looking down at his shirt and up around, and down at his shirt and up around the place continually again and again. And they were like, the group that they went with is like, what are you doing, Wilson? What are you doing? And he said, well, this is just the silliest thing ever, because the most difficult place for me to see this sponsorship is here on my shirt. I have to make an effort to look down at it. Yeah. Whereas all I need to do is open my eyes and look around this place, and I see these gambling sponsorships around me.
It's just interesting because I just feel people are always talking about this, think of the children argument, but I just don't know where we all stand on it in terms of if you try and avoid these people knowing, try and avoid teaching people that these things exist in the first place. Does that make an awful lot of difference when somebody grows up and turns 18? I don't know.
Yeah, it's a difficult one because obviously you can't gamble until you're 18. We all know that. So it's a difficult one. I think they're doing the right thing by not putting it on. Yeah. But then there should probably be the option for adults as well, whether they want to display it or not. So if a parent is worried about their child growing up and seeing it, yes, you're going to see it all around the ground, but you've got to look at a lot of fans who don't actually get to go to the games all that often and just see it on TV. So you're pretty much just watching the game in my eyes. If the dad chooses not to have the sponsor as well, then maybe there's a lesson in there, or sorry, misses or anything like that. But if the adult has the choice to follow suit as well, then that might have a more sensible message, or come across better to the child who's obviously wondering as to why his shirt is different.
But at the end of the day, the kid is going to be He wants to wear that shirt not because, well, it would be sweet if it was because his dad was wearing it, but at the end of the day, his idol, that centre forward of his favourite football team, he wears a shirt and he's got the betting logo straight across there,
Yeah.
So it's always going to be a difficult one to say like, oh yeah, we've taken it off the kids, so that's gonna be better. I think obviously it's illegal to gamble before you're 18, but that doesn't mean that it's not happening, right?
Yeah, the thing is, if you cast your mind back to your first ever football shirt, or even thinking about it, you picked the shirt or you like the shirt because of how it looked.
Yeah.
You're not looking at the Mansion Bet logo and thinking, oh, I wonder if I can have a bet there. Or
Yeah, no,
what's betting?
yeah,
You're
I
looking at
agree.
it thinking, oh, that looks cool with that shirt.
Well, it
So
did
that's
make
where
me
the
think I
difference
might
is.
use autoglass when I've got a car. One day.
I think on the point of education, I think this is something, again, Matt went to a seminar this year, and was it YGAM?
YGAM, yeah.
Yeah, they said that they're very much in favour of having betting education for kids, and I think, you shouldn't be pretending it doesn't exist, because this might seem a strange example at first, but you'll see where I'm going with this. If there was no sex education, there would be more teenage pregnancies, because
Yeah,
people
100%.
need to know about these things. And if you teach a kid about gambling, doesn't mean they're going to be a problem gambler. It means that when they turn 18, they'll know that okay, I can't gamble until 18, and then I'll hope if they're taught the right way, the chances of them gambling responsibly will be higher.
Yeah, it's the same with cigarettes, same with alcohol. Awareness increases. Like the more knowledge you have, the better your decision will be when it's time to make it.
I mean, we saw the introduction last season from the EFL on the sleeve badges to add responsible gambling, to change them entirely. They were like luminous yellow, so obviously you're drawn to it straight away. But that's an interesting approach. I don't know why, if they've done that just to tick a few boxes and jump through a few hoops to allow the sponsorships to continue, as if to say, look, we're doing our bit here, but they're still allowing all the gambling advertisement in the first place. So I'm not quite sure what they're trying to achieve there. I think they're just ticking a few boxes, to be honest. But if they're not, and I'm wrong, there's still responsible gambling there on TV, on all the players' shirts from League 2 all the way up to the Championship for all to see. But at the end of the day, it's only a sleeve sponsor, so it's not like right across the chest, is it, for obvious to see. So.
And then just to move things across the pond, because this is where the narrative always seems to be so different over in the US. Since we saw the PASPA appeal just over a year ago, we've seen the NHL partner with MGM, the NFL partnering with Caesars, New York Jets with MGM and 888. How differently do we think betting sponsorship is being perceived by US media and US players as well?
It's all new at the moment, isn't it? That's the way you've got to look at it. When the betting first came, like cast your minds back when betting first started becoming on football shirts and sponsorship deals with Premier League teams and Championship teams, we weren't straight away like approaching it with caution and being like, oh, but this could have huge effects in 5-10 years time. It was all exciting and new, isn't it? And that's especially what's happened in the US at the moment. So maybe down the line they'll be having the same discussion as what we're having now, but at the moment money's being fed into all these different sports and all these different leagues through gambling, and I think they're just in a period at the moment where it's just all exciting and new.
Yeah, exactly. I think the new thing is exactly what it is. It's similar to our last podcast, really. The US is still very focused on land-based, and for a lot of politicians, at least, the idea of mobile seems to be this groundbreaking new thing. But I think the US market will get to the same stage as the UK market is in terms of perceptions, and then it will be better to compare it. One thing that is interesting is we discussed this the other day in terms of shirt sponsorship.
Yeah.
It's not really a thing in the US yet, so it'll be interesting to see if that does become a thing.
No, it only seems to be more about plastering it over the broadcast rather than the actual shirt. So where do we see this issue heading? What happens next? Could the backlash create more discussions about complete advertising bans, like we're about to see in Italy, or do we see the operators maybe addressing the issue and making sure that the storm calms a little bit?
There's always going to be people who are going to push for a complete ban on advertising, and while I think more rules might come in, tighter regulations, yes, I don't think the complete ban will happen, and if it did, that would be pretty scary. So would those crusaders push to ban gambling altogether if they were to achieve a full ban on advertising? I mean, that would be sort of the potential step further down the line, but no, I don't think we're going to have a complete ban.
It's bringing in too much money to football as well. Especially for sort of slightly lower league teams who need this sort of money to help them out from not falling into financial fair problems. So I think it's too much money in it, and I think it's gone too far down the line to completely strip it back. It will stay prominent, and teams will keep renewing deals as we've been seeing over the past week.
Yeah, I think it's not going to go away, and I don't think it should. Whether I agree with what GVC is doing with its ban, that kind of thing will help, because if one operator does a little bit less, for example, the BetDAC Sunderland sponsorship, where we should mention that where they've donated their sponsor to a charity.
Yeah.
That is a really good thing. I can't sit here and say, oh, it's terrible that that's happened. It's a really nice initiative, and it will sort of go here and there. There'll certainly be a political battle in terms of there'll be a debate had and held over the next few years. Yeah. And it might be up to people like us, very reasonable, articulate gentlemen, to say that no, sponsorship is okay, and let's keep it that way.
Should hear the outtakes before you call us articulate.
Well, we're 2 months away from the start of next season. Let's see how this issue develops. Thank you for your time, gentlemen, and of course to you listeners. Please keep checking into gamblinginsider.com and our GI Friday newsletter for more info on this and all gambling topics. Plus, our May-June print issue is out now. See you all soon.